Hi there, welcome to this video. Today you find me up on Portsdown Hill above Portsmouth on the south coast of the UK. It's a lovely day. You can see out over the English Channel and the Solent. Right in the distance you can see the Isle of Wight. For those of you who don't live in the UK, have a look at it on Google Maps. It's right on the south coast of the UK. One of the things I've been testing in previous videos has been the quality of using a modern mirrorless camera like a Z series camera to do video versus an iPhone X versus an Osmo Action, and trying to work out what are the use cases for each of those different types of cameras. They obviously are based on different kinds of sensors, they have different trade-offs built into them, they're designed for different use cases. And what I'm trying to do is work out in my workflow in producing content, primarily for this channel, but for other business opportunities also, what is the right combination for different types of video. Because, for example, today I'm shooting this on my Z series, my Z6, and I'm using the Joby Gorilla Pod, and I found somewhere to stand it. So it's kind of a relatively heavyweight solution, so I've had to bring it up here, but you do get a better quality. But sometimes I perhaps want to capture a quick piece of content, as I've said, when I can use my iPhone X, perhaps coupled with the Rode Wireless Go microphone system. Or perhaps if I'm moving around, I can use my Osmo Action, which has inbuilt image stabilization, which is quite powerful. And therefore, when I'm moving, I can get the equivalent of a gimbal, smooth gimbal-like footage without having to carry my Z6 with a 24-70 plus a gimbal, which becomes quite heavy, quite cumbersome to carry around, particularly if you're perhaps carrying two bodies, a couple of lenses, because you want to do a mixture of stills and video, or you've got a mixture of requirements. So today I'm going to look at doing a like-for-like comparison of the Z series with my iPhone X with the Osmo Action and see what the difference is in quality. So I'm being harassed today up on the top of the hill by a tractor which is cutting the grass, but what I've set up now is I've got my Osmo Action shooting 4K 24 frames per second in normal color profile. I've got my iPhone X which is just shooting 4K again in its native style, and I've got my Z series set up shooting again 4K 24 frames per second. Now what it's going to be interesting to do is to cut between them and just see, because they're all recording the same footage that I'm getting here. So I'm now recording on my Osmo Action, my iPhone X and my Z series. The sound is being recorded to my Z6. So I've got my Osmo Action shooting 4K 24 frames per second. I'm using the normal color profile, so I don't have to do anything to it. I can just use it out of the camera. I've got my iPhone X shooting 4K also. And then I've got my Z6 shooting 4K. So it'll be interesting to see in this lighting condition. The sun is just coming across me here, so you can just see here we're shooting away slightly from the sun, out across Portsmouth. It'll be interesting to see what the footage looks like. Obviously there'll be slightly different aspect ratios, or fields of view should I say. But it will be interesting to see what the quality is like. They're all shooting 4K, as I say, they're all shooting 24 frames per second. So they are like-for-like comparisons. It's quite a good light day. We've got nice sunshine here, nice, pretty clear blue sky, a few high-level clouds today. A little bit of breeze coming across, but as I say, I'm only recording sound on one device, although both the iPhone and the Osmo X will be recording through their native microphones. So let's take a look and just, let me know what you think. So here's a fairly straightforward side-by-side comparison. It is important to remember that each of these cameras is in a very different price point. The Osmo Action here in the UK is around £250 to £300. The iPhone X is around £1,000, and the Nikon Z6 is probably close to £2,000. And that drives Obviously different quality, different sensors, and I've put on the screen here the different sensor sizes. So you've got the Nikon Z6 with a full frame sensor at around 860 square millimeters. The Osmo Action is the next biggest sensor at 28 millimeters, and that's 1/30th roughly of the area of the full frame sensor. And the iPhone X has the smallest sensor at 17 square millimeters, which is about 1/50th of the area of the full frame sensor. So quite a big variance there, and that obviously has quite a big impact on the size of the pixels because they're all 4K cameras, and therefore the amount of light captured. This is a bright day, but I would expect low light performance to be vastly different to this. It is a bright day, but it's also a very high contrast day. I did set it up so the sun was coming from one side to give a bit of a challenge to the three different cameras to see how they perform. So if we start by looking at the colour rendition, they're all pretty much straight out the camera. The Z6 to me is probably the closest to reality of having been there. And there is quite a variance, particularly with the Osmo Action, which is much warmer, a much more orange tinge to the clouds, as you can see there. And the iPhone does a fairly reasonable job about keeping a fairly neutral rendition. Now with the Osmo Action, in most cases I'm going to be shooting probably the D-Cine-like colour profile rather than the normal colour profile which I've used here, and the D-Cine-like is a much flatter profile and allows you then to perhaps capture a wider dynamic range and then do a little bit in post-production to bring the colours back to a slightly more neutral or more vibrant look that I'm looking for. But I'm quite happy with that Nikon Z6 colour profile. It is the neutral colour profile I was using in camera. So it's not the vibrant ones, it's fairly flat, fairly neutral, but still got a bit of colour in it and doesn't take too much post-processing to get it to where I like it to be. But of course colour is something that can be fairly simply tweaked in something in a post-production program like Premiere Pro that I'm using today. And as you can see on screen, this is with probably 30 seconds of tweaks in the colour palette for both the Osmo Action and the iPhone X, and it's brought them back pretty similar to the Nikon Z6 without too much effort going into that. So all three cameras seem to do quite well when it comes to the colour profiles. And I'm quite happy with what I'm seeing on the screen from each of them. Obviously they've got slightly different fields of view, and that makes it look slightly different, but from a colour perspective they're all doing a pretty good job, I think. So let's now take a look at something that's less easy to manipulate once you've captured the footage. One of the advantages of 4K video is that you can actually crop in and create a zoom effect in post-production, because you've got so many pixels. You can actually, crop in a little bit and create different camera angles perhaps from the single piece of footage. So actually sharpness and clarity of image is really important when you do that, because obviously when you zoom in, or you crop in should I say, any softness in that image is going to show up. So let's take a look at a cropped in version of each of the three videos from the three different cameras. So this is scaling up by a factor of 2, so in effect a 2 times zoom. And as you can see, we're starting to see that the iPhone X is probably the softest of the three images. The Osmo Action isn't too bad, and the Z6 is fairly sharp. And if we take that up to a 3 times zoom, it becomes much more clear that the iPhone X is probably the softest of the three cameras. Not unsurprisingly, it's got the smallest sensor at 1/50th of the size of the area of the Z6. The Osmo Action is not doing too badly. Its sensor is 1/30th, if you'll remember, roughly of the area of the full frame sensor in the Z6, and is retaining a fair bit of sharpness. Now, one of the criticisms of the Osmo Action is that images tend to be quite sharpened out of it, and there isn't the capability to soften the images or change the sharpness setting in camera. And what we're seeing here is that it's retaining a fair bit of definition. However, where you start to really see it here is the difference between the Z6, the Osmo Action, is the on the Z6, the amount of dynamic range means that you can still see a lot of definition in the shadows, particularly on the face there. Whereas the Osmo Action, there is a loss of definition in the shadows there. So we're seeing the two sensors really pulling apart here in terms of quality. But again, this is at a 3 times or a 300 scaling, 3 times zoom in. So it's unlikely I'm going to be going to this level. So I'm really, testing the images quite hard here. I used quite a harsh lighting, and I'm zooming right in. So actually, the Osmo Action there is looking quite good from an image perspective, because I would be able to zoom in a little bit and still retain a lot of the definition in the image, so long as the lighting is perhaps a little more balanced than I have set up on this occasion. So I'm going to have to think about that if I'm using my Osmo Action for some more perhaps ad hoc authentic pieces to camera. So in summary, I've been quite impressed by the 3 different cameras. They've all got their strengths, their weaknesses. I think they've all got a place in my kit bag for different kinds of video. I think they're all more than capable as 4K video cameras. And really it is about matching the right camera to the right use case. I think the thing that does notch up all of these cameras is the Rode Wireless Go external mic, and it does increase the quality of the audio, which makes all of them perhaps usable as 4K cameras in their own rights. Let me know what you think about the different footages. Shooting down here by the sea has been quite interesting. I've got seagulls overhead and been buzzed by a guy on a tractor cutting the grass. So hopefully that hasn't detracted from the sound quality today. Hopefully the Rode Video Go is working well. Let me know which of the qualities you think marries up with which use case. As I've said, the reason I'm testing these different approaches is because in the modern era we've got options in terms of what cameras and what kit we carry with us, and sometimes we overlook different ones. I'm going to be using my Z series mirrorless cameras when I can plan what I'm going to carry, plan how I'm going to set it up. I have the time to set it up to create perhaps that higher end quality. But what I've been interested in is, are there other times when perhaps I can use my smartphone or my Osmo Action to capture 4K footage of a quality level that is high enough to create more dynamic output for the channel? So for example, using the iPhone X when perhaps I want to do a more impromptu piece to camera coupled up with the Rode Wireless Go to uplift the audio quality. I'm perhaps not moving around and I can use it on a mini tripod. The Osmo Action I've been looking at for when I'm perhaps wanting to create some moving content and I want some image stabilization, and again using the USB-C to 3.5mm adapter to connect to my Rode Wireless Go kit to create the higher level audio quality. So let me know in the comments below what you're using, which bits of kit are you using in which different use cases? How are you deciding on which different device you're using, and what's your experience? If you enjoyed this video, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell to be notified of future videos, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video.